Pre-reading questions. 1. What is the difference between a biography and an autobiography? 2. What famous people from the past have you learned about by reading about their lives? 3. Do you know of an autobiography of someone alive now who you like or admire? The Honey Seller. Climbing the Mango Trees is the autobiography of Madhur Jaffrey, a well-known writer who was born and brought up in India. The autobiography tells of the author's childhood in Delhi, the capital city. This episode recounts the preparation for exams and a visit from a memorable salesman who came to the house one day during the study period. As soon as I got home from school, hot and sweaty from cycling, my mother would produce cold firni from the refrigerator. This was a very light, cardamom-scented pudding made with coarsely ground rice that my mother set in shallow terracotta bowls. I would slide the spoon in and begin eating. The sweet, cool, milky pudding, tasting of the cardamom and pistachios with an earthy aroma of terracotta, went down smoothly. There was no time to rest afterwards. May was the time for our annual exams and all of April had to be spent doing revision. While I studied in my hot back room, my mother sat knitting for my sisters in their frigid Himalayan convent. In the superheated Delhi of April, I could hardly even look at wool, let alone touch it. My mother just carried on heroically. Each examination was 3 hours long. On most days there were 2 exams with a break for lunch. Before left early in the morning, armed with sharpened pencils, pens freshly filled with ink, ink bottles, rulers and erasers, my mother would appear with a plate containing 2 almond balls. My mother firmly believed that almonds were brain food and that any child sent off to write 2 examination papers for 6 hours unfortified with almond balls was surely suffering from the grossest form of neglect. I would return home, ink-stained and exhausted, and immediately begin studying for the next day's exams. My mother never asked me how I had fared. She always assumed I would do well. Often she would try and distract me from my studies if she thought I was working too hard. One afternoon, when the servants were off duty, she called me saying, "Come, come, there is a man here selling honey." By the time I came out, the man was well into his sales pitch. "Purer honey than this you can never hope to find. Look at its fine golden color. See, it still has pieces of honeycomb suspended in the middle. Smell it. The odor of nature's flowers." My mother cut right to the chase. "But how do I know it is pure? What proof do you have?" She was hoping she had stumped him. He turned out to be wilier than that. "What proof, you want to know?" "The oldest proof in the world. It has worked since the beginning of time. First you catch a fly and then you throw it into the honey. It will sink. If the honey is impure, it will keep sinking and die. If the honey is pure, it will rise to the surface and fly away." At that, he swung his hand in the air and caught a fly, flinging it immediately into the honey. It sank. Then it started to rise, higher and higher until it reached the surface and flew away. My mother was so impressed, she bought several jars and I went back to my studies. That evening, when the cook returned from his afternoon break and my mother recounted the honey story, he said, "I remember AB, oh, lady, you have been completely duped. I can do exactly same thing with sugar syrup." Our cook seemed as adept at catching flies with his hand as the honey man. He caught one and threw it into a jar of sugar syrup that my mother kept for sweetening our fresh lime juice. The fly sank, then rose to the top and flew away. We teased our mother mercilessly.
Listen and read. Ross, what's the matter, Laura? You look really fed up. Laura, I am fed up. I've had a terrible row with Mum and Dad. Holly, so what? I'm always arguing with my parents. Ross, so am I. Laura, but this is serious. They want me to stop working on the project. Ross, you're joking. I don't believe it. Holly, neither do I. You can't leave the project, Laura. Laura, they say I'm spending too much time on the project and neglecting my school work. Jack, and are you? Laura, I don't think so. My marks have been okay this term. Ross, so have mine, and I've spent hours and hours on the project. Laura, I tried to persuade them but I couldn't. Jack, nor could I. I tried talking to them, too. Holly, this is a disaster. We need you, Laura. Ross, absolutely. You're our computer expert. We can't do without you. Laura, well, I'll try talking to them again. Jack, and so will I, but I don't hold out much hope. Answer these questions. 1. What part of the author's life does this autobiography cover? 2. What were the ingredients of the pudding that was produced from the refrigerator? 3. In what part of India were Madhur's sisters at school? 4. What was Madhur's mother doing for her daughters in the Himalayas? 5. How many exams did Madhur have on most days? 6. What things did she take with her? 7. What was in the balls that Madhur's mother gave her before she left for her exams? 8. What was the man selling? 9. Why did Madhur's mother buy several jars of honey? 10. Where did the cook throw the fly and what did it do? Absolutely. Adept. Afterwards. Almond. Annual. Argue. Armed with. Aroma. Assumed. Author. Autobiography. Bowls. Cardamom scented. Knit. Memorable. Mercilessly. Nature. Neglecting. Off-duty. Persuade. Pistachios. Pitch. Preparation. Proof. Pudding. Pure. Chase. Childhood. Coarsely. Compositions. Convent. Cycling. Disaster. Distract. Dupe. Episode. Eraser. Examination. Exhausted. Fair. Recounted. Refrigerator. Row. Sales pitch. Shallow. Sharpened. Sink. Smoothly. Spoon. Stump. Suffer. Sugar. Superheated. Surface. Fed up. Firmly. Fling. Freshly. Frigid. Gross. heroically, immediately, ink-stained, jazz, joking, suspend, sweaty, sweetening, swung, syrup, tasting, tease, tent, terracotta, unfortified, wily,